Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity podcast, where I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business community. Today's episode is the second in a series around the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS. If you don't know what that is, be sure to check out the first part in the interview series where I interviewed Zach Kramer, an EOS implementer, where we covered the basics of EOS. This episode is brought to you by Clara CFO Group. Clara CFO is a fractional CFO agency dedicated to supporting growing B2B service companies. If you're looking to up-level your financial strategy and leadership in your business, visit claracfo.com to learn more. Today's guest is Laura Shiel. Laura is our COO here at Clara CFO Group, and she's been a guest on the podcast before. Laura is a CPA, a CFA, and a fractional CFO here at Clara CFO Group. She has a passion to see small businesses succeed and become more operationally efficient. Laura, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about this topic of EOS because it has been our journey over the past year, and really like from thinking about it to finally getting it all put together and actually implementing and starting to use it. It's been a little bit of a process for sure.
Yes.
But, we talked to Zach about what EOS is, but maybe in your words, how do you describe EOS to people?
Yeah, I think EOS is a system for small businesses to meet their goals. So it really gets you focused on where are you going, what is your vision, and what steps do you need to take to get there. I think it adds so much clarity, which we're all about here at Clara CFO. But without a system, I've seen businesses kind of just flail, miss targets, miss goals, and this really gives you a way to be accountable to where you want to go with your business.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good way to put it because, you can implement any kind of system, but why would you even care? Why do you even care about implementing a system? Well, ultimately, we start our businesses to hopefully accomplish something at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of it, is kind of establishing this vision and where you see yourself in 10 years, and then backing into what is a 3-year goal, what does a 1 year look like, and then breaking that down into quarterly and then even weekly tasks and accountability points. So I like that. So I don't remember, how did we start thinking about it for Clara? Do you remember?
It was definitely about the time we talked about me stepping into the COO role, I think. Because it's really hard. I don't think EOS is right for a solopreneur or someone where it's just one member managing. It could be a team, but not anyone else on a leadership team. You really need at least one other person for the system to work well. So I think we started to talk about it when we were thinking about, me stepping into the COO role, and what is a way that we can really define where we want to go with us and our new structure. And it naturally just made a lot of sense, I think, from my experience working with clients that were using EOS as well.
I'd heard we had some clients that had implemented EOS. I'm part of EO, and I was in an EOA at that point in time, which is different than EOS. That's Entrepreneur Organization, totally different from Entrepreneur Operating System, but they do share some letters. But there are a lot of businesses that I had business owners that I had talked to that had implemented EOS and were using it inside. So I had heard about it, but I had always said, well, I'm too small. It doesn't make sense. And then even with 2 leadership team, quote unquote, leadership team participants, I was questioning whether or not it would work in that space. But I think then you read Traction, right?
Yes.
And for people watching on YouTube, I'm holding it up. It's by Gino Wickman. This is kind of a good kind of first step understanding of what EOS is. It's a good read if you're trying to sort of get your bearings on it. I think you read it, and what were your initial thoughts?
Well, it really spoke to me. And I actually had read it after I had been working with a client in EOS for a while. And so I was familiar through just like real time, hands on, and the structure and the meetings, working with that client. But reading the book, like the book is, I think, really well written. It's simple language, doesn't take you a long time to read. And as I was reading it, I just was like feeling more and more excited about how well the system is laid out. And it's really like that is the operating manual, that book, to implement EOS. There's implementers out there that can help businesses really follow the process, but I felt super confident after reading it and just how much it resonated with me that I'm like, okay, we got this. We can even self-implement it because that book lays it out so clearly. And I was really excited because I thought that it gave us a really good game plan with me in the operations role and you in the visionary and CEO role. Like, here's what each of us do. Here's how it works, that relationship within the system. So I got really excited after I read the book. I think it was like around Christmas time. And then we just jumped into it right away. We did an annual retreat in January and we jumped into doing our visioning work in that session. And it just took it from there. Like it happened really fast.
Yeah. I was all for like how excited you were. Like, I was so excited that you were excited because I think I had maybe tried to read it once before. And it was a simple read. And then when you were reading it, you were like, oh, you need to read it too. And so I read the whole thing and I was like, I don't know why I didn't read it before. Maybe because I had stopped myself to say like, well, I don't have a leadership team. That was probably my stopping point before. And now we're just a leadership team of two. So there's only two of us on our team. But I was so excited about how much it resonated with you on the structure, because I always have a hard time with that. But then kind of also understanding these two very critical roles in EOS is the visionary and then the integrator.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the two terms. So the visionary and the integrator, they're two different roles. And it makes sense why like you were super excited about the process and the structure of it. And that is really like your strengths are, you really grasp a lot of that. And then I had a harder time thinking about how do I do this structure? And I was wanting to think more kind of in the visionary and the strategic. So it's been such an amazing partnership working with you and like you really get the structure of EOS and you're kind of driving the rigor on it and working the plan. And then I'm, working with the plan that has been created. So that works out really nicely. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the cadence of how we do meetings. So maybe starting with like our annual planning, because that's really when we kicked off or said, hey, we're going to be implementing EOS at the beginning of 2024. And we started off with this annual strategy meeting.
Yes. And that timing worked out really well. But I want to put out there, you don't have to start it at the beginning of a year. I have plenty of clients that have started it, mid-year in Q2 or Q3, and it still works just as well. But it happened for us nicely that we decided to start it in the beginning of the year. And the first step is really to do a annual meeting where you're working on vision work. What are your 10-year goals? What does the company look like long term? And those meetings are typically 2 full days long. And so I think we may have spent a little bit more time on our retreat than 2 days, but it was very like filled. Like at the end of those days, I feel like my brain was like ready to shut off because it's so much to get through and really thinking differently than when you're in a day-to-day running a business type situation. So you start with the 2-day annual retreat, going through like the book lays out a really good agenda for each type of meeting that you have under the system. So there's, vision, or VTO is what it's called, where vision traction organizer, what that stands for. And you may have gone over that with Zach too, but it's really thinking that future period. Where does everybody want the business to go? We also did some work on accountability chart, which is like a org chart on steroids. So really, as part of the vision, what do we want our team to look like? That happened in that meeting. Let's see, what else did we do? We did a lot of work about what is our ideal market and our ideal client. That helped really clarify some things. And we also talked about one important thing about accountability within the system is, are people in the right seat? So we did do some analysis of, here's where our team is structured today. Does everybody feel like they are in a position to succeed in the roles that they're in? If there is a situation where someone is not in the right role, there's a pretty clear pathway that EOS lays out on how you resolve something like that. So we did spend a lot of time talking about the team, I think, in that first meeting, because that's the most important thing for our business growing, a service-based business of professional organization, that we have the right team in place. And we could see that, whatever that vision is for the future, it meant that we created those milestones along the way to have the right team as well.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the more impactful. I mean, everything was impactful for sure, like the kind of kicking off. But I think that practice of thinking about building an accountability chart, which is, like you said, like a org chart on steroids. It's really thinking about not who do we have and placing them in an org chart. It was what roles need to happen? What are the functions in the business, and what roles do we need for the business to run properly? And then assessing who should be doing those roles, if they are already, or if they need to be moved potentially into a different title or a different role. And then also kind of allowing us to look at our team members. There's the concept of like right people, right seats. Right seats is where they're sitting in the accountability chart. But right people is also, are they aligned with the values of the company? And is there really like, do they get it? Do they want the job? Do they have the capacity to do it? There's that get it, want it capacity to do it is a big thing in EOS. That was really helpful too, because we were able to go kind of, through our team, which, was really good, and try to think like, well, maybe why hasn't this person been excelling? We think they can excel. Why aren't they excelling? And maybe they're in the wrong seat, or maybe they like have they're in the right seat, but maybe they're just not the right fit for the organization. So I feel like that was like a pretty impactful thing. And even as we think about bringing on new team members, I think it's been super helpful for us to, think about who is the next best hire. Do you want to talk a little bit about what like some of the roles we identified coming out of that accountability chart and how it's affected who we've hired this year?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things we did was we outlined what we call operations. It's also like service delivery, could be another name for it. Like how we come and show up to clients, the team that is in front of clients. And at that point, it was really just a few of us that were serving clients, and then also serving all of these other roles that the business needed. And so we defined the operations team and how many CFOs we wanted to have, whether that included accounting or bookkeeping services too. I think at one point, like at that time when we were discussing the future, bookkeeping was part of our strategy. Things have changed since that, and we've clarified what our strategy is around bookkeeping for Clara CFO. But we identified a level of accounting support that was different than what we had today. So I think that at the time was a pretty big eye-opening piece to, if we really wanted to go all in bookkeeping, we needed a different type of role. And how many really CFOs we wanted to serve or to have in the next year to serve clients and make sure those were aligned to our growth goals that we had for the business. But also beyond the operations team, we also really clearly outlined, what does sales and marketing look like? What does admin and finance look like? And to be honest, we had a lot more boxes than people in our team at that point. And so there were, for us, really, our names were listed on a couple different boxes, and they go through in the book that's not too uncommon when you're first starting out, that people may be playing different roles. And you may have people in one role reporting to someone that they then like report to in a different capacity, depending on how those roles are split up. So I think that we identified that we were each performing several roles for the time being to make sure that, we had the right structure in place, and eventually we'll replace those roles with additional team members as our company grows. But also really building out what does it mean for our core business, and what is the structure we need for our operations team to be set up for success.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really important from what I remember is that like you can have multiple people on the accountability chart. They can be in charge of different roles,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't want to have two people in the same role. Like you don't want to
Yes. Yeah.
share, like we wouldn't want to have like you and I both a head of operations like
Mm-hmm.
that, can get confusing because who's really accountable at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fine that, I might be in charge of, I might be visionary and I might be in charge of sales and marketing and I might be in charge of admin right now.
Mm-hmm.
But like that, we're not both in charge of admin.
Yes,
Is
that's
that?
where I think the confusion can happen, particularly like if you have a team under you. How does that team really who is in charge of the department, and how do you split up the responsibilities within that team? It just gets really blurry. So I think that's a big rule, and an important rule as part of the accountability chart, that each person really fully embodies whatever that box is on the org chart.
Mm-hmm. One of the big takeaways from that process too is that we identified the roles and then we were able to draft roles and responsibilities
Mm-hmm.
documents that came out of each one of those. And then at that point, we were able to go back to our team members if we were sort of shifting their roles a little bit, or we said, we wanted to clarify exactly who would be reporting to. So one of the big shifts that happened is that I was kind of in charge of like the CFO operations because I was the business owner,
Yeah.
so it made a lot of sense for that to be me. And I had always been serving clients. And so I was sort of head of everything. And so as shifting from going a leadership team of one to a leadership team of two, that was honestly a huge relief for me to be like, oh, I don't have to be in charge of every single thing. I mean, I'm still like the CEO, right? But like, I don't have to be, the direct report for every single thing. And so having,
Mm-hmm.
Laura, you stepped in and you were able to be a head of operations. And now then CFOs will kind of report to you. And in my, and this is a good example, like as I am still serving clients as a CFO, like I'm still a fractional CFO for some clients. Like technically, as in that role, when I'm wearing that hat, I'm reporting to you on
Mm-hmm.
that. Um,
Yep.
but then I'm technically also the visionary and the CEO of the business. So like you would be reporting to me in that sense of you being head of operations, then goes up to the CEO. So
Mm-hmm.
just kind of being really clear that like in a small organization, it can still work, but it's important for everybody to know sort of where they fit on the
Yes.
chart.
Yeah.
Um, and those roles and responsibilities were a really great chance for us to sit down with all of our employees and really just kind of have a revisit on, what they were hired to do and what their current role is, and are they doing it? Do they really know what's expected of them in the role? Had we ever
Mhm.
fully given them, I mean, there was like a job description at one point in time. They were hired, they've been given tasks, but it was a really great way to sort of like sit down with them and say, this is what we're really looking at. This is what we really need from you. And this is your KPIs and what we would measure your success on. And
Yeah,
I think that was a really powerful part too.
absolutely. And to be fair, in EOS, the recommendation is really to take it as far as on the accountability chart. They have the employee's name, the job title, and then a list of bullets, like five, I think they say like 5 to 6 bullets of these are the main responsibilities for that role. So as head of operations, that's managing the team. That was one of my bullets. Overseeing the client relationships. That's another. And so you have these lists of bullets, and they're meant to be short and sweet and descriptive. I love that we've taken that step farther, and it's not something necessarily that it wasn't in the book, but we actually have a document for each of our roles that, as part of coming out of that annual retreat we worked on. That was one of a big to do that we had. Is each role has and they're a good size, like probably 4 to 5 pages in a Word document. of here's in detail what these roles and responsibilities mean for your role. Here's how our values show up. So we have this whole section that says that if our value is this is what it means for that person in the role to be exemplifying that value. And so our employees can have this basic resource guide that says this is what we expect of you. And I find that really amazing on both sides. We've clarified this is what we expect out of your role. This is how you are successful in your role. These are measurables that will give a sense of how you're doing in your role. But as the employee too, they are clearly have a guideline on this is how I can operate within my role. This is what's expected of me. It's not blurry. It's very clear. And I think that's an important thing for any business. It's somehow to clarify this is what you expect of folks. Because if there is a performance issue in the future, it's very easy to tie back to, well, this is what we expected of the role. Which one of these specific things is not happening? And work through it in a more straightforward manner with some good examples. So we've taken it a little bit further, I think, but I really love that part and that structure we've created that just further helps create that accountability that EOS is all about.
Yeah. I mean, even from an HR perspective, I think if any HR professionals are listening to this, they would be like, yes, you should have a roles and responsibilities document for every employee that's on your team, and they should be aware of what's there and what's expected of them. It also is very helpful if you come to like performance issues and you need to, address something that's really not happening. You have a document that is there that they have said yes to, that they understand what's required of them. And if they're not, performing to that, you have something that's very clear. So that is really helpful. Can you talk us through what does our meeting cadence look like now? So we had that annual meeting that happens. And then, I mean, we revisit a lot of that annually, some of the big picture stuff, and then even some of it quarterly. But we don't take 2 days every quarter to do that. So can you walk us through sort of like our regular meeting cadence?
Yeah. So the next step would be quarterly strategic meetings. So outside of whenever you decide to start your EOS journey or have that first annual 2-day meeting, then on a quarterly basis after that, you meet really for a whole day. And actually ours is tomorrow for Q4. So this is a timely conversation. And that's really, we do go back and we spend a little bit of time, like at least half an hour looking at that vision traction organizer, kind of regrounding ourselves on what is the big picture for this business? What are our long-term goals? And then within EOS, we have the concept of rocks, which are really 90-day priorities. So coming into Q4 tomorrow, we'll be revisiting how our Q3 rocks came out. Did we achieve everything that we expected to do within the quarter? Why or why not? We'll have a discussion about that. You want to aim to achieve 70 to 80%. That's kind of like the gold standard that they talk about in traction. And then we set rocks for the coming quarter. So the quarterly cadence for these strategic meetings is really important because you can't really continue on a plan longer than 90 days. Like at that point, the book says that you can get pulled away from the focus that you have. So it's good to come together as a leadership team every 90 days, revisit why we're here, what is the long-term vision, and what are we going to do in the next 90 days to help achieve that vision. So we've got an annual set of goals that we set in that 2-day meeting that we're checking in on the quarterly meetings too, to say, are our rocks in support of these annual goals? Have things shifted? I think it's just really important to come together on that frequency and step back from the business day to day and look at it and say, where are we headed? How are we going to keep traction against our overall vision? So that's the 90-day, the quarterly meetings. So we meet weekly in the L10s. And another big part of that is the IDS, identify, discuss, solve. So what's come up in the business that we as a leadership team need to really get to the root of the issue. So what may be kind of written on our list of things to talk about may not actually be the issue. This happens a lot where we kind of have to dig a little bit deeper to find, there may be a question about time tracking. That's what's listed on the IDS. But as we kind of discuss it more, we get down to maybe the root cause is something about culture or something like that. And so really drilling down, being honest and vulnerable with each other, and working to solve that thing. And so that's where I see so much progress happens within EOS, because you are getting down to that level of detail where you're really solving problems on a weekly basis, moving things forward. The L10 also is really important to capture to-dos. So whatever comes out of those IDS discussions, we write down, okay, here's how we solved it. Here's what's exactly going to happen next. And so we revisit those to-dos on a weekly basis. And it's just this level of, again, accountability, that we are keeping track of what's the most important things that are happening in our business, staying strategic. The IDS items are not, very tactical. They really are strategic conversations that we're having. And important that we spend that time together as a leadership team. We'll have other meetings throughout the week, you and I, that are more to like talk about specific things or go over financials or whatever it may. But the L10 meeting is really to keep moving forward on the priorities that we set for the quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I am shocked at, how many things maybe just weren't being addressed before, because, we never had a structure. And I was doing this with myself too. So I wasn't keeping a list of all the things that might come up that we might need to address. Now, I would say our IDS list will tend to have maybe 8 or 9 things on it, sometimes more. And we can usually tackle about 3 items, that's our average, maybe 4 if there was a really low hanging fruit. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes we've gotten into IDS and we it is such a big issue that it takes, the 60 minutes that are allotted essentially, or the 55 minutes. I can't remember what it is, but, we will need to use all of that time to take over that. But it's this dedicated time. And I would say, during the week, we'll kind of Slack each other about hey, this came up, or this, or, I got this email, hey, I got this proposal for this marketing thing that we had talked about. We can bring that potentially to an IDS, and Laura will text me or send me a message and say, yeah, let's IDS that, so then we can put it on the list. So we don't have to stop what we're doing right that second, because we know we always have this time to work through certain things. And then, sometimes, like she said, we'll be in this time where we where, it's something that we really need to work through, and it's not going to happen in the 90-minute L10, and that's totally fine. But I find that weekly touch point is kind of where the magic really happens. And also just monitoring when you're because we go through a scorecard on that too. So we can look and see, we've identified some key metrics, things like revenue, number of clients, that'll be different for every business, the scorecard that will be customized, but we can see very quickly if we're off track or on track for hitting goals.
Yeah. And so I think there's so many great things about the scorecard. They call it the desert island metrics. If you were stranded somewhere, what could you look at to really know what's going on in your business? So that takes some time. As we were really more in an implementation phase earlier in the year, it took some time to figure out what are those things that we really need to know about the business. But now we've got into a systematic rhythm where those are getting populated every week. So we have that to glance at and identify when there's something that's going off kilter that we do need to have a conversation about to get back on track. I love the scorecard. I think that whether you want to go fully in on EOS or not, having some way to measure your goals and what you're tracking towards is so important for any business. So we would do that with our clients through dashboarding, but having that data at your fingertips and being able to see how things are going is really important.
Super helpful. Okay, so we are self-implementing EOS. So you have kind of taken the role internally as being the implementer of EOS. So there's a term called integrator, which is a role, but then the person who's kind of helping us keep track to, are we doing it the right way? Are we, getting things, getting our meetings on the calendar? Are we, tracking everything? That would be the implementer. So you can hire implementers, which is, when we interviewed Zach Kramer, They are an introvert and an implementer. Implementer. I kind of wish they had a different name for it because there's the integrator and the implementer, and sometimes like in my brain will do that, and I'm not the only one I know. But you can hire it out if it feels like maybe somebody on your team is not rigid enough with understanding what's required, or you maybe just don't even have the capacity or the time to go and figure that out. That is a resource. It does cost money, of course. So self-implementing is more potentially more cost effective. But sometimes if you're not going to do it and do it well, you don't get all the value out of implementing EOS.
Right? Yeah, you want to go all in, I think.
Yeah.
And so if you can self-identify that you're not a person that loves structure, you're more in that visionary role, it feels like it would be really hard to do. Or maybe you have a really big leadership team and you need like an objective person to take you through how it works. Then I think an implementer can play a really important role to make sure that you do it correctly. And where I've worked with a lot of did I say integrator? I meant implementer. See, I'm doing it.
You said implementer.
Okay. And I've worked with several implementers before, and where they really show up is in the annual and the quarterly meetings. They help you talk through any team issues that are happening, really set the vision, the big things like the accountability chart and the VTO, and then also the rocks. Like I see such good conversations when an implementer is involved in those, and really helping even potentially a bigger leadership team kind of narrow it down to everybody's on board that these are going to be the priorities for the team. They typically don't participate in the weekly L10s. So those ones are run directly by the members of the leadership team that are employees of the business, but they'll come back with the implementer on the quarterly basis to check in on how everything is going. And some businesses really like that structure, and they keep an implementer throughout to be part of those quarterly meetings. Others may employ an implementer for a period just to get going, and then the quarterly meetings start to become more second nature, and they can be run by the team themselves. And then maybe the business doesn't need it going forward. So there's a couple different ways that implementers can really play a key role.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. So I think we're going to kind of like wrap up this portion of our self-implementation journey. Before we do, how do you think it's going for us? What would you rate us?
I would give us a 10. I think that so I would say for the resources that we have and how busy we are, like we've really committed to it. And I think that's a really important part. And to me, I think it's changed the business a lot. As we grow, I don't see how we could not have a system in place to help us really strategically do that. And I think our meetings are really productive. I think that it's a journey, right? Like it talks about in the book that maybe the first couple quarters, your rocks are not quite written correctly, or it's hard to achieve them. But I think we've gotten to a space now where we can have really good conversations and be on the same page about these are the priorities. And we're achieving those. I think that the growth the business has had this year is in part because we've put this structure in place and really laid a foundation so that, we're familiar with it now. We can use it to our advantage as we get bigger and support the goals that we have beyond this year even.
Yeah, I agree. I can't really imagine going away from it at this point because I feel like it's been so effective, and I feel so much more confident about what the next stages of growth look like, because I feel like we have that roadmap, and the roadmap, and we're also reassessing the roadmap regularly and saying is this realistic? And we're looking at that. And also just we're aligned, in what that is. So if you have a leadership team that maybe has, lots of different priorities and everybody's kind of got their idea of where the business is going, this keeps us aligned in a really great way. So I think it's going great. I also would give us a 10. If I'm going to give us anything less, it's going to be because maybe I'm not doing something that I should be doing.
I don't think so. So you're doing everything right.
Awesome. Well, okay. We're going to actually, because we've got more to talk about in the EOS topic, we're going to call this part one of our conversation. And, so that will be wrapping that piece up, but everybody watch out for the next one. If this is interesting to you and you're thinking about it, what we want to talk about next and where we're going to go in the next episode is what it looks like with a CFO on the team of a company that has EOS implemented or they're implementing EOS. So, Laura, thank you for being here, and we will be on the next episode together as well.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.